Hello everyone and welcome to another video about self-driving cars and the social nature of traffic. I'm Eric Winkhuizen. I used to work in the self-driving car industry as a social scientist, and it was while I researched self-driving cars that I became convinced that they cannot be safe and should not be on the road without direct human supervision. One of the most common responses to my videos by people who are excited about a future with self-driving cars and therefore are not easily swayed by my incredibly persuasive arguments against robotaxis is that self-driving cars will be safer than human drivers because they are convinced they will follow the rules of the road. I think there are two reasons why this is such a pervasive argument. First, when other drivers break the rules, it is very annoying. And second, that self-driving cars, because they're robots, will execute the rules in their program faithfully every time. So having more self-driving cars would eliminate this nuisance of law-breaking drivers on the road. The point of this video is to show that unfortunately this argument does not hold. The traffic laws are not instructions for how to drive. People drive by reference to a set of social traffic norms that are largely unofficial and can be applied flexibly to every situation. There are situations in which there are multiple contradictory rules that can apply, and when that is the case, it requires judgment and understanding to decide what rule to follow. Let's start by looking at four-way stops, for which the traffic laws appear to be particularly clear and simple. There are only 4 official driving rules in the DMV handbook. 1. Road users who are already in the intersection have the right to clear the intersection before others go. 2. Road users should go in the order they arrive at the intersection. 3. When 2 road users arrive at the same time, the car coming from the right has priority. And 4, if 2 road users arrive at the same time from opposite directions, traffic going straight has priority over traffic turning left. Given the simplicity of the traffic laws for four-way stops, it should be easy to encode them into a computer program. Therefore, it may be surprising that after 15 years of fine-tuning the computer code for self-driving cars, they still often don't get it quite right. Let's look at 2 instances. First, a Waymo in San Francisco, and then an Uber driver with a Tesla who uses the full self-driving software to drive his customers to their destination in San Diego.
No, I've seen that before. Especially too if somebody asks to see the power, because these things are notoriously quick. And every now and then when someone wants to, and I'll punch it, and they're like trying to reach for stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. There's nothing to grab. Yeah. See, it sees a cyclist and it's blue, meaning it's waiting to see what he's gonna do. He's trying to be extra safe here. Wow. And these 2 cyclists as well.
Cool. But does it really know about like so it does really good with the four-way stops? Or
typically, like except when humans are doing what they're doing, which is just running through. Good job, everybody. See, the car finally went after that guy. It's almost too courteous.
In the Waymo case, the driver has edited the video with a subtitle that reads, "Right-of-way violator at four-way stop." He must feel that the Honda got to the stop line after his Waymo did. In the case of the Tesla, the Uber driver blames the human drivers for breaking the rules. And I think he is right. Several bicyclists and cars arrived after the Tesla, and yet they crossed the intersection before it. When the driver gets upset,
typically, except when humans are doing what they're doing, which is just running through.
I think this is exactly the kind of breaking the rules that self-driving car fans expect will improve when there are more autonomous vehicles on the road. But there's another way of looking at this. The law for four-way stops raises a very practical question for road users, namely, who arrived at the intersection first? This question cannot be answered by some kind of objective authority, but must be worked out by the people who are present. And there can be ambiguity. In the Waymo case, for instance, it is unclear whether the Waymo has come to a complete stop before the Honda. It kind of keeps rolling. Is it really already there? To handle this kind of ambiguity, a social practice has developed at four-way stops, especially when it is busy. Drivers communicate "I am next" by starting to roll forward slowly as the person ahead of them is still crossing the intersection. This puts everybody on notice that the driver will be crossing the intersection after the current car. It also makes the crossing more efficient. If by contrast you don't move, then you indicate that you are not next, and that allows others, especially whomever is in line after you, to think, "Oh, I am first," and jump the queue. In both these cases, the self-driving software communicates "I am not next" for a moment too long, so the other car goes. This example illustrates that there are two types of rules that govern human behavior at four-way stops. One is the law, but the other are social norms or socially shared practices, and these rules can imply contradictory actions. And it turns out that for humans, the social practices are paramount. That becomes especially obvious when it is really busy. Consider how this Tesla performs at a larger four-way stop in San Francisco. The Tesla lets about 5 cars go ahead of it because it is much too tentative rolling into the intersection. Every time a new car enters the intersection, it stops and waits, even though there is ample space to start rolling forward. So it is displaying "I am not next" behavior, and the other drivers jump ahead. While the human drivers are strictly speaking breaking the law, the Tesla is breaking the social norm. It is not just four-way stops where social norms have developed that can be at odds with the law. Take the speed limit. Engineers can program a robot never to exceed the speed limit. You just create a map with the speed limit in every street and you match that with your GPS, and whenever you reach the speed, you activate cruise control. Like that, a self-driving car will follow the law perfectly, which is safer than what most people do, which is speed. However, we must also acknowledge that there are other norms about how fast people should drive. Driving notably slower than other cars, even if you are going below the speed limit, can have adverse effects on traffic safety. Take this example from a Tesla on FSD in San Francisco.
And coming up, we have a pretty good example of why I think that full self-driving cars are basically inevitable at this point. So we have some stopped cars off to the side of the road, as is normal with San Francisco. We have a FedEx driver approaching his truck, and then somebody darts around me to get around me while there's a pedestrian already there. There was absolutely no reason for this. This guy saved no time and just...
The Tesla owner complains that the drivers, like the guy that passes him, are the reason self-driving cars are inevitable. But note that the other cars ahead of the Teslas are going around the car that is turning left, while the Tesla stays behind it and has to slow down. It is also slow to accelerate after the vehicle ahead of it has turned left. The Tesla may not be breaking the law, but it isn't following the social norm to keep up with traffic. That can irritate other drivers, and while the maneuver to go around the Tesla may be upsetting for him, I know many drivers who would have done the same thing. And they are neither crazy nor terrible drivers. Social norms determine whether people will keep to the law, or how much they are willing to bend it. Of course, traffic would be much safer if everybody would keep to the speed limit. Self-driving car fans will often say that this is the reason people should not even be allowed on the road. But that is an authoritarian fantasy. And besides, the promise of self-driving cars has always been that they can drive perfectly safely in human traffic, that self-driving cars would adapt to us, not that we would be obliged to adapt to them. Thus far, we have seen examples of situations in which there are applicable laws, but also applicable social norms, and they can be contradictory, and when they are, people will let the social norms prevail. Indeed, social norms tell us when to follow the law and when to bend it. On a recent nightly Uber ride from Quito to the airport, the driver drove through every red light in town because there was nobody on the road. You might ask, could self-driving cars not do the same thing? Well, Tesla tried. They decided to implement the common practice of making rolling stops at stop signs when there is nobody else around. But it was met with outrage, in part because when robots break the law, it feels much worse than when people do, because robots have no agency. They neither know the law nor what it means to break it. Moreover, rolling stops have no benefit other than that it saves a little time for the driver, so there is no compelling reason to flaunt the law in this case. It may seem odd that people would follow social norms rather than the law, but there are many situations in which the law simply is insufficient. When you drive down a street with a double yellow line and you encounter a moving truck double parked in your lane and in the process of unloading, you could follow the law, which says that you are not to cross a double yellow line to pass another vehicle and park behind the truck until it leaves. But nobody does, because there's a compelling social norm to keep traffic flowing, and so you go around the moving truck. This is such an obvious social norm that even self-driving cars do it, although sometimes you can question how.
So check this out. This guy's stopped, and so it wants to go around him, but it's also being cautious. It sees these guys coming. See how it's proceeding slowly because it sees all of these cars?
And there are situations when not following social norms can be downright dangerous. This footage was filmed by someone with a dash cam. From the dash cam's vehicle, the cruise appears quite unexpectedly when the light is already green. It appears so late that one is inclined to think that it must have gone through a red light, but that is not the case. The cruise went through green, but decided to wait behind the car that is making an unprotected left turn, even though the social norm would be to go around them on the right and proceed straight. When the car finally turns left, the traffic light must have turned red. But instead of going very quickly, the cruise accelerates at its normal, easy pace. Strictly speaking, the cruise can be said to follow the law that says that cars that are already in the intersection have the right of way and can finish crossing. But the social norm is that when you are in the intersection and the light turns red, you accelerate strongly to clear the intersection quickly. It is not hard to see how the cruise's driving could have caused an accident, which is of course why the driver posted it in the first place. This illustrates that even in situations where the laws seem to be very clear, like at intersections with traffic lights, there are social practices for how to implement the law. The problem with self-driving cars is that their program fixes a particular interpretation of the social norms and cannot make in-the-moment judgments to act in what may be an exceptional situation. Just take a look at this cruise at this lighted intersection between two one-way streets. The video is a little difficult to see, as this was recorded from a dash cam in a car a few cars back, and the cruise is not clearly visible all the time. When the video begins, the light for traffic on 3rd Street has already turned yellow. The cruise has crossed the stop line, but is not yet in the intersection, still stuck on the pedestrian crossing. Then the traffic light turns red. At first, the cruise stays put in the pedestrian crossing and traffic on Harrison starts to go. A few moments later, as traffic on Harrison is in full flow, the robo-taxi decides to cross, cutting right through the flow of traffic just behind two cars and right in front of a bus. I don't know whether this could be considered a legal maneuver because the cruise had already gone through the green, but the social norm would be for the robotaxi to wait until the light turns green once more before crossing the street. Just imagine how frightening it would be to be a passenger in that cruise's backseat. And let's be honest, there are many situations in which it is not so clear what rules you should follow, and deciding how to act is a judgment call. In those situations, Teslas on FSD have the incomparable advantage of having a human driver who can take over control when FSD is violating a social norm. Consider this Tesla FSD driver who takes over from the software at a very busy intersection.
This is a really tough intersection to get through. There's a ton of pedestrians here, a ton of cars.
Four-way stop.
Yeah.
From what we can see on the camera and listening to the comments of the driver and passenger, the Tesla algorithm is getting stuck because it is following the law that it should yield to pedestrians.
So let's see what's gonna happen.
And you're not gonna like juice it, because I used to be like,
if somebody behind me starts getting annoyed, then I will juice it.
and that means
Yielding certainly is appropriate, but after some time there are other considerations, namely that everybody has a right to get to where they are going and you should keep traffic flowing. So while this FSD tester tries to let the software drive, he takes over when a car comes up behind it. The social norm that you should not make others wait unnecessarily takes precedence over the law to yield to the pedestrian. So the driver juices his Tesla and rolls into the intersection.
I'm gonna give it an accelerator push because otherwise it'll never go.
Even though the path is not completely clear and he has to stop in the middle of the intersection to let another pedestrian go. Another situation in which social norms take precedence over the law is whenever road users interact directly, as we saw in my previous video on interaction. When someone offers to let somebody else go ahead of them by waving them on, it is almost always followed by the other party going, even if they did not have the right of way. Take this example in which a Tesla is waved on, but the software does not go.
That's how beta goes. No, you can't change into that lane. That's not a lane, so reported. Okay, it figured out that that is not a lane. Oh man, everything's okay. You're stopping for the pedestrians. So there's a lot of pedestrians here. We've done this before and it handled it beautifully. They don't have to stop for us, so okay. Everybody's waving me on. Oh my gosh, it's so awkward. Oh, I hate it. All right, I tapped the accelerator there. Another intervention. Okay, this drive is terrible.
The driver knows the rules. The pedestrians don't have to stop for him. He should yield. But sometimes pedestrians are gracious and willing to let a car go ahead of them to keep traffic flowing, especially since the Tesla had stopped but then started to roll forward. However, when they do, you need to respond and go and not wait. Note all the signs this pedestrian gives. She slows down, looks at the Tesla, puts her left hand in her pocket. She's doing what interaction analysts might call doing waiting. When the Tesla still does not go, she nods and even takes her hand back out of her pocket to wave him on. The driver can't handle the social awkwardness of FSD's driving, thanks to the pedestrian, and takes over. Here's another situation for which there may be no applicable laws, but the social norms are well established. Before the light turns green, the driver of the car in front of the Waymo tries to communicate that he wants to park by turning on his left turn signal and then actually reversing.
I thought that person was going to reverse into us.
By doing so, the driver probably hoped that the Waymo would back up to give him space to make the maneuver, but the Waymo just stays put. The car keeps its left blinker on, even though it can't turn left at the intersection because the cross street is a one-way street. It is clearly trying to communicate that they intend to park. When the light turns green, the car briefly puts on its right blinker, then its left blinker, and drives forward towards the right to get a better angle and get into the parking spot. Instead of giving the car space, however, now that it is even more clear what the car really wants to do, the Waymo just rolls forward to follow the car. Now the Waymo has crowded the car and made the parking maneuver yet more difficult. Undeterred, the driver backs up, but he has to come very close to the Waymo in the process, so close that the passenger freaks out a little bit.
No.
Just as the car passes by the front of the Waymo, the bus behind the Waymo honks impatiently, which scares the driver of the parking vehicle momentarily, but then he continues his maneuver. There may be no laws that say that you must make space for people who are trying to park, but there are social norms. The Waymo repeatedly ignores the parking driver's attempt to communicate, and in the end he is so angry that he flips off the Waymo as it passes. Not understanding the social norms can cause such anger on the road. Here's a clip from a ride by a CNBC reporter in a cruise with a similar outcome.
We just went around a car with its emergency lights on. It did it pretty smoothly, but now we're behind a car that's trying to park. He got out. Oh my gosh. And he kicked it. I'm gonna put him in the window. So this guy just kicked the car, and now we're calling support. This is stressful. Oh my gosh. Oh, he just spat on the car.
The other driver is livid, kicks the cruise and spits at it. And while I abhor this kind of behavior, I do understand the driver's frustration because the cruise is oblivious to what is perhaps the most basic social norm in traffic. Don't block others from getting to where they want to go. Because they don't understand social norms or where other people want to go, robotaxis will inevitably break those norms and annoy human drivers around them. Sometimes this can cause those people to take stupid and dangerous actions. When those stupid actions in turn cause accidents, the robotaxi will not be legally liable, but they are far from innocent in my book. Because as I have said repeatedly, traffic is social, and not annoying the heck out of other drivers is part of what it means to be a good, safe and responsible driver. And this is also, by the way, why self-driving car statistics fail to reflect their negative impact. In conclusion, in this video I hope to have shown that self-driving cars will not be safer because they will follow the rules of the road. Such assertions rest on misunderstanding of what the rules of the road really are and what it would mean to follow them. There are many situations in which the law is unclear or insufficient, and in all of those situations it takes an understanding of the social norms to determine what to do. Self-driving cars, as programmed machines, do not really follow the rules of the road. They just mindlessly execute the rules in their program. That's not at all the same thing. When robotaxis drive perfectly down the street, we cannot help but attribute their competence to an understanding of the rules of the road. It's driving perfectly. How could it not understand? But whenever they break our rules, their true nature as programmed robots reveals itself, and their lack of understanding of our social norms becomes evident. That is when you realize that even when self-driving cars do drive perfectly down the street, they do not really understand the situation or the rules that apply, that their good driving is in many regards accidental, as they simply do not have what it takes to drive and drive safely.